needs are, Lord, and where we can help us recognize those opportunities. And Father, this morning we're certainly grateful for all the blessings we enjoy each day of our lives, but Father, we're especially grateful this morning for the sacrifice that your Son made, that we have this promise of life everlasting with you. Lord, walk with us each day and forgive us when we fall short. These things are praying in Jesus' name. Amen. It's good to see everyone this morning, as I said. Last week, just as a little bit of a review, we talked about Nehemiah's efforts to get the work on the city walls started. We talked a lot about his drive, his persistence. I believe of course, he knew he was doing God's work. He had prayed about it, and so he was able to turn his project into their project, because it's when everyone has some ownership in it, it's certainly going to work better that way. He was unfazed by all those people that were trying to distract him, trying to keep him from getting this work done. But as we talked about in the very beginning of this study, the book of Nehemiah gives us some real examples of how we can conduct the work of the church, how we can work within our congregation here. Someone came up with it's kind of a humorous little thing, calling it the 4 steps that a church has to go through to get something new done. The first one: we've never done anything like this before. Well, I don't know about that. We never did this before. The second one: well, that just won't work here. That might work other places, but that just won't work here. Okay? And then that third guy comes in and says, well, you go ahead if you want to, but I'm not having any part of that. I just disagree completely. I'm not going to participate in that at all. What's the last one? Look what we did. All right.
You know, that sounds like the church today.
You think? Absolutely. Look what we did. You know, we got a pretty good example, maybe not of the first 3, but we're standing in a look what we did right now, I think. This is a tremendous facility and something we ought to be proud of. But, you know, for the folks that were really intimately involved in that, did they hear some of those other things? I don't know. I would like to say no, but probably somebody did. You know, it's kind of a joke. I mean, that was told as something to be humorous, but if you're the target of that criticism, it's not funny. All right, if you're the person that's, you know, on the receiving end of some of those things, it's not funny. Nehemiah had to face critics from within his own people and also externally. Who were those external critics? Who were the ones named? Anyone remember the names? Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem. Geshem was the Arab in the group. But who was the real critic? Who were these guys just stand-ins for? Satan. Absolutely. Is he still around doing stuff like this? Absolutely. If there's any way for him to cast doubt on the things that we're doing, to derail, destroy a good effort, he'll be there. And he'll have his advocates here to make that happen. Just like Nehemiah, our answer should be confident and the same as his. The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore, we, his servants, will arise and build. That was what he said. So, once again, got some good examples of how we ought to conduct the business of the church today. Jim made a comment last week or 2 ago about, you know, the chapter 3, about all the people that did work, and I agreed with him. I thought, well, this is just kind of a list of all those folks. However, the writer of my book, here, this New Living Bible Lessons, says we're wrong. That it's not just something to skim over. There's some good lessons to learn from this, and so we're going to explore some of that today. In that 32 verses of chapter 3, we're introduced to name after name of people who did good work, who worked on that construction, or most of them did anyway. There's a couple of detractors even there. So let's start with verse 1. Then Eliashib the high priest arose with his brothers the priest and built the sheep gate. Oh, did everybody get one of these maps or sitting close to somebody who did? Okay. You handed them out. You and Mike handed them out, and you both ended up without one. The sheep gate, if you see it, it's at the very upper right hand, if you're holding it in your hand, upper right hand corner. That's the sheep gate. And the sequence of this goes, as the British say, anti-clockwise. I would say counterclockwise around the city, starting at the sheep gate. But who are the people first mentioned here? The high priest. Eliashib the high priest arose with his brothers, the priests, and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They consecrated the wall to the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Hananel. Hananel? All right, you could see those things on that map where they did that. So we mentioned first the high priest. Well, looks to me like, and that the high priest here have kind of, I think Nehemiah's rubbed off on these people because he was a servant leader, and the high priest stepped in and mentioned here first as the same, to give an example of those around him. He's a high priest, but he's out there laying brick, he's out there shoveling, he's out there with his people rebuilding the wall. The examples that we have where leaders serve in the Bible. Let's go back over to John chapter 13, where God's giving us, Jesus is giving us an example of where leaders serve, where he washes the apostles' feet. Anyone remember why he did that? That was in John chapter 13. And the preface and the first part of the chapter, it's now before the feast of the Passover. Jesus knew that he was going to be crucified. And he poured water, there, verse 5, he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel. And if you remember the interaction he had with Peter, where Peter wasn't going to let him wash his feet. And Christ told him, well, you don't understand, but you have to let me wash your feet. Said, and I'm not going to read all that, but everyone remembers that story. But do you remember why he did it at that point in time? What else was going on? John doesn't capture it, but if you go back over into the book of Luke, what are the apostles or his disciples there arguing about? Yeah, who's going to be the big dog? Who's going to be the greatest here? They weren't thinking about the lessons that what Jesus had told them. There was a dispute among them as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who have authority over them are called benefactors. But it is not this way with you. But the one who is greatest among you must become like the youngest, and the leader like the servant. For who is greater, the one who reclines at the gate or the one who serves? It is not the one who reclines at, is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I among you as the one who I am among you as the one who serves. So he's given them the example that they can't sit around and order people around. That's not their job. Their job is to serve the people, I turn my page here, to be that servant leader. Where do we have examples of that in the church today? How about our eldership? What are some of the other words used to describe our elders? Overseer, pastor, shepherd. Those are all descriptive words of that role. But the elder is not, it's not an honorary title. They serve the church. It's a very, I think there's a lot of honor involved in that. It's an honor to be appointed to that eldership. But those individuals that are named there, or have that title, they're appointed to that leadership role, and they're charged with the responsibility to carry on the work of the church. In doing so, Peter writes that such men are to be examples of the flock in 1 Peter 5:3. Why is that? Well, for the same reason that the priests led the way in rebuilding the walls. Those that lead serve. All right, so that's the first lesson that we can get out of this. There's 5, actually, as we go through this. Second lesson surfaces that there's work for everybody. Doesn't matter what your skill set is, there's something that everyone can do for a big project. All right? If you look through that chapter 3, and I've turned away from it, but I think I can find it here. You'll see several times in there, next to them that repaired, or next unto them repaired. So we have people here, and next to them, other people did work, and other people did work, and other people did work. So Nehemiah had a good plan. He had the work spread out. And I'm looking at this. This map came out of a commentary that I have. It's not a great map because I wish it were a little bit bigger, but it's the best I could do holding that thing flat down on my little copier at the house. But you see a lot of wall there. There's no scale in. Well, there is a scale at the top, though, isn't there? In meters, gives you an idea of how big this project was. But everyone had something to do. There was a task that anyone could do, or there were tasks there that everyone had the opportunity to participate in. Now, someone planned this. Jim and I both think it was Nehemiah. I believe he still agrees with me there. He was a planner. He got everybody involved, and everyone had a job. All right? Does everyone have the opportunity today to have a job? We are all given that same. If you look over in Mark 16 and 15, we're given the responsibility of taking the gospel to the entire world. That we all have different skill sets, we all have different abilities, but everyone can do something. All right? It's kind of daunting sometimes when you look at the billions of people across this earth that don't even know that Jesus is the Son of God. It makes it almost overwhelming. However, if you look at it from the fact that it's not just you that's doing it, it's all of us that are working together to do that, then that makes that task a little easier to swallow. Not everyone has the same skills or the level of talent, but that doesn't mean that we are less important than anyone else around us. Everybody's needed and wanted in that work. If you look at what these people had to do, everybody was working side by side. They were helping one another. If somebody ran out of material, they could borrow some from the people next door. If they became discouraged, they would be encouraged by their neighbors. If they needed a helping hand, they got that. So that type of cooperation is not only appreciated, but it's very significant in the work that it can be done. everybody working to the same end. I told you guys before, I keep honeybees, and it's amazing what those little bugs can do because they're all working. There's nobody sitting around. It's not like that cartoon or that animated show that movie was out. Nobody's arguing about somebody doing more than, well, I'm doing more than he is. That doesn't happen. They all work for the same goal. They all work together, and it is harmony, and it is amazing how much those little bugs can get done. It's kind of amazing what these people did.
I think it's interesting too is that everybody worked. They didn't have a hierarchy established where, somebody said, well, you go do this or we'll kill you. Everybody
Yeah.
got in and went.
Everybody did.
Just like our congregation, there's a whole bunch of people involved with getting a particular job that we get here done.
Some people work more.
And some people work more, but everybody worked. And everybody was behind you. And we didn't have to get permission from some great hierarchy to do it either.
Right? We didn't have to go to Rome and say, hey, could we please do this, or have them tell us what to do. This was on our effort. The other side of that, though, is that not everybody works the same. There's some people that have put in a lot more time in this than certainly than I have. All right? I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I wonder how many hours Owen spent on the dozer out here doing the initial site prep. I don't know if Tony, you keeping a timesheet? I don't want to embarrass Tony either, but he's been out here a lot. I mean, there's just two examples of people at the upper end of that of the hours that were put into this building, to our project. So, in the same way there. And as Mike points out, everyone was involved. However, there were a couple of people that weren't. Let me see if I can find that real quick. There in verse 5, it says, moreover, well, let's go back up to verse 4. Next to them, Mirmoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, and I'm butchering these pronunciations, but you'll just have to forgive me. They made repairs, and next to them, Meshullam, the son of Berechek, the son of Methezabel, made repairs, and next to them, Zodak, the son of Banah, also made repairs. Moreover, next to him, the Tekoites made repairs. But their nobles did not support the work of their masters. The nobles didn't. So they had people that actually, we can't get some, there's going to be some people there that just think, I guess, because they're specifically pointed out, that's a little bit below me. That's menial work. I can do much more important things than that. I don't know if that's what happened here or not, but it was very specifically pointed out in this text as an example of people that did not. All right, so anyone remember, I know we didn't look ahead, but does anyone remember how long it took them to do that entire project? 52 days. That's open. You can find that over in chapter 6. 52 days of building this by hand. They didn't have any backhoes. They didn't have any dozers. They didn't have any equipment like that. They're doing it all by hand. Levers and bars and all sorts of other mechanical aids, but it was all manpower for the most part. There may have been some animals involved, but there was nothing. No internal combustion or hydraulics involved in this project. All right. But they did get it done. They got it done in 52 days. And it was a great project, a great example of of how we can work together in the church. Okay.
It's special. The sheep gate has a significance according to the writer that I'm reading here. Says that The sheep gate is where everybody brought their sheep and their lambs through that gate to go to the temple to sacrifice them.
Okay?
It represents Jesus. He is the beginning of a spiritual journey for Christians everywhere. He is that sacrificial lamb. It's interesting.
Yes, it is. All right. Continuing, though, this and I'm going to stay within a good point, Jim. But I mentioned there in verse 4, Meremoth. And I mention him specifically because if you go back on down here into verse 21, he's mentioned again. It says, after him, Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Hakos, repaired another section. So he got done with his that was assigned, saw that there was more work to be done, picked it up. Where's that example that for something like that? Remember, what analogy can we come up with? How about Christ when he talks about the second mile? This text calls Meremoth a second miler. All right, he did what he was assigned, and then he looked for something else to do. He didn't say, "What do I have to do?" He said, "What can I do?" All right, and went on to do more work. In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5:14, Jesus talked the principle of the second mile. He said, "Whoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain." That's in the King James. Go with him too. Jesus knew that the Romans had the authority to compel the Jews to go with them a mile. Historians write that many of the Jews had measured off exactly a mile from their house and put a stone there, marker there, so that they knew to the step how far they would have to carry, because the Romans could compel them to carry their load, their pack or whatever, a mile. Well, he said, just don't worry about that first mile. Go with them 2 miles. Well, what would that do? What would carrying that pack the second mile, what impact would that have? Do you think it would have an impact on the Roman? The guy that asked him to? What was that?
He'd be shocked.
Might be shocked.
It might give them a sense of cooperation out of those.
Yep. He said, Christ knew that the change of attitude could benefit the Jews as well and leave a favorable impression on the Roman who compelled him to carry the load. That might evolve into better treatment, more consideration for the Jews. So Meremoth did that. It doesn't say, but in verse 20, right above where I just read, and it says, after him, Baruch, the son of Zabai, zealously repaired another section. So they mentioned his enthusiasm. And he says he repaired another section. Now, I don't find him before this, so I don't know if this was a second one or it just talks about how excited he was to get out there and get to do this work and to continue the process that Nehemiah had started. All right, but there's another good example there of someone who may be not only was he zealous and excited about it, this may be his second chunk of wall as well, or door or whatever. He repaired the section from the angle to the doorway of the house of Eliashib the high priest, and you can see where those are on our map. So the fourth lesson here is that good works are seldom, if ever, get 100%. Not everybody is going to think it's a good idea. Not everyone is going to participate. Not everyone is going to join in. There was obviously a high level of involvement here. But if you take a look at verse 5, like we did here just a little bit ago, it says their nobles did not support the work of their masters. That's unfortunate when it comes to the work of the church, but I'm going to raise that. It keeps sliding on me. sometimes we'll find that we have people with that noble attitude. Most congregations, and I think we'd include ourselves on that, not everyone participates in it. Not everyone is going to be there to support it. But in many cases, though, most of us are. And he points out in this text, have you ever noticed that workers are much happier than the people that aren't working? They're enthusiastic about the work. They're involved. So is it not also true that those who work criticize the least? If someone's in there working on something, they're not likely to be a detractor. Irrespective of all that, we have to be careful not to be discouraged by those who refuse to become involved. But sometimes that workload can really be burdensome, can be a lot of work, and it's good when we have other people to help with that. You probably notice the lack of participation most when the workload is the highest, but that's just life, I guess. Yes, sir.
I think there's a great correlation in the rebuilding of the temple and the building up of the church today. That, you know, as you said, there's plenty of work to go around, but it just seems like, you know, going between the Old Testament and the New Testament, this is kind of an example for us that, you know, each of us has a place in the building up of the church in today's world.
Exactly. I think that's one of the reasons that we have Nehemiah, that we're given that to look at, given that as an example of how things can work if we actually put our mind to it, how things should work. But once again, even in this, not everybody thought it was a good idea. Not everybody wanted to get in and get their hands dirty. Still the same today. Ronnie?
How long was the wall torn down?
Well, Nebuchadnezzar tore them down. They were there. How long were they in captivity? 70 years. And then from the first time the first group went back, and then it was about 60 years later that the second group went back, and then it was about, was it 13 after that? Something like that before Nehemiah went back.
Well, I was just, let's say it was torn down 52 years. No, it would have been
70, 60, it's 130, say it's 140 years, 145 years.
I was wondering if there was a thing, kind of like it was a year down and a day to build back. I was
Trying to correlate the time it took them to build it back to how long it had been.
The point is, it's down a long time, and it didn't take long. Once the people decided to do it, it didn't take long to do it.
Right. 52 days. It had been down 140 some years, if I do the math right in my head. And now 52 days it took them to rebuild it. Now, that doesn't mean they rebuilt everything the way it was. They got a wall built back. If you take a look, Ronnie, there toward the bottom of that, you can see the dash dotted stuff where that's where dashes and dots where Nehemiah rode around at the bottom of the city, and then finally got off and had to walk. The dotted line there, not the dash line, but the dotted line is where he had to walk. Well, you notice that the wall that they were working on was to the left of that dotted line, but there's another old wall that goes down to the right. Well, that old wall went down, that's the Kidron Gulf, or Kidron Valley, Kidron Gulch, and that old wall went down, way down the side of the mountain that Jerusalem is built on, and encompassed a spring. There was a source of water there. All right? When they went and built this wall back, they abandoned that. You can see here where the new wall is up on top of the ridge. And apparently they had enough reliable sources of water. They didn't have to build that old wall back and didn't have to watch that section of the city because they didn't have all that many people, not like it once was. And it was no longer necessary for them to get to that water. So they didn't build it back exactly like it was, but they restored it so that it was a reliable wall for them, a reliable stronghold for the city. So there's no implication there that it looked the same when they were done as it did before. Okay? But they did get it, they got it to where it was a usable, good wall. All right. The last lesson in this thing, the fifth lesson that we should observe is in verse 10. So verse 10. Next to them, Jediah, the son of Harumph, made repairs opposite his house. So this guy is working on stuff right next to his house. He's cleaning up, and the author here believes that most people cleaned up the area that was in front of their house